The 6 most important things to have when you start sewing or quilting are these. You need to have a self-healing mat. You need to have an acrylic ruler, and if you can only have one to start, I would get one that is long. This one is 6.5 inches by 24.5 inches. You want something around that long so that when you buy fabric by the yard, you're going to be able to cut across that fabric when it is folded in half. Speaking of cutting, you definitely want to have a rotary cutter to use with this ruler and mat. It's kind of a 3-part system to do all of your cutting. Then you're going to need pins or clips to help keep things together before you sew them, scissors for cutting when a rotary cutter isn't going to work, and then of course a seam ripper. If you haven't been using it recently, you probably haven't been sewing enough. Don't have any shame around these little things. They are very, very important. And you also need them if you ever do buttonholes, because this is how you cut the middle of the buttonhole open. So if you only have 6 things, in addition to your sewing machine and fabric, of course, these are the 6 to have. Let's talk about the proper use of quilting rulers. Once upon a time, I was working on a quilt and I was kind of newer to it. And my friend told me, you have to be really careful about how you hold your quilting ruler so that you do not mess up your hand. And I was doing this, and I do see a lot of people do this. I was kind of holding my hands up and gripping and cutting. And she saw me do that and she gasped and she said, "Tara, please don't do that. You're going to hurt your hand." And I was like, yeah, okay, whatever. And I went on and I kept doing it. And I'm going like this, and it really does hold it quite nicely. But if you do a lot of cutting, you could end up like me. And I ended up having major tendon problems in my thumb. I had to wear a brace on my thumb for almost 6 months before it felt better. It was awful. But had I listened to her, I wouldn't have had that problem. So what she told me to do, and which also helps with your ruler not sliding as much, is to put it down, put your hand flat down on the ruler, and then put your pinky over here against the edge. So it kind of is holding that in place, and you're just pushing down flat. Then you're not straining your wrist, you're not straining your fingers, and you're not straining your thumb. So I would highly recommend you get in the habit of cutting like this so that you don't end up in traction like I did. If you end up not listening to me as well, this is the kind of brace that ended up working the best after having 3 of them. This is by 3M for Churro. And it Velcros, and it's got a little bit of metal in here. And you just slide your thumb on there, and it's going to kind of keep things in place. And I had to sleep in that, and then I would wear it if my thumb was bothering me, just kind of mobilize things. Not really a look I was going for on the regular, but if you ever have a problem, give that a try. With so many kinds of rotary cutters, how is a girl to choose? A rotary cutter is basically a circle knife, and you want them to be nice and sharp so that they will cut through your fabric. The main difference in the types of rotary cutters is how you hold them, and different people will have different opinions on which style feels best in their hand. So let's take a look at some of the most common options. A rotary blade, it is basically a round piece of metal, and the entire outside is very, very sharp to cut fabric. Most are plain for straight cuts, but you can also get some shaped blades. This one will do a wavy cut, acting like a pinking shear to help reduce fraying or to create a decorative edge. The most common size is the size I just showed you, 45 millimeter, and that is the size in all of these rotary cutters. Then it also comes in larger, 60 millimeter. If you're just cutting lots of long strips, that can make it go a little bit faster. And then the other common size, but not as common, is the 28 millimeter, which is great when you're trying to cut smaller curves and shapes. Now, the main difference and reason there are so many different kinds of rotary cutters is how you hold them and how they work. So these are both very similar. You hold it in your hand like this, so it will work with your left-handed or right-handed. And for this one, you pull this back so that the blade sticks out. You do your cutting, and then you push that forward to protect the blade. One issue with blades like this is if you're not in the habit of closing it after you cut and you just put it down, you could cut yourself. I'm guilty of regularly not closing my rotary cutter, but more on that in a minute. This is very similar, but it has a very different feel. This handle is plastic, And this one is metal. So it is a lot heavier. It has a lot more bulk. It's got kind of this comfort grip, and the shape is a little bit different. So you're going to feel the difference when you try either of these, and it's going to be a matter of personal preference. This is protected with this plastic all the way around, so you're not going to cut yourself. So to open it when you're ready to cut fabric, you push this button, and then it has this lever on the back. So you can push it either to the right or to the left. So you can use it as a right-handed person like that, or left-handed by flipping it like that. But again, you do have to make sure you put it back to the center after you cut, because there is a danger of cutting yourself if you just rub your hand across that by mistake if you're putting it down on your mat like that. This used to be my favorite because I really like the grip. I like how it feels. I like that you just push with your thumb to put that blade down, and then you push this button to put it up. However, I was pretty bad about remembering to do that after every single cut, and some of my YouTube people gently reminded me that I was just asking for trouble and please be better about it. Well, I wasn't great at being better about it, so I changed styles. Now I use this style where the only way to have the blade out is to squeeze. So the second I let go, it's all safe. I don't have to think about closing it in between cuts. This is one that a lot of people have never seen. It's very good on your hand. Sometimes when you're doing a lot of this, your thumb will start to hurt. Sometimes my pinky will even start to hurt from squeezing or holding a rotary blade like this. This is different. You hold it differently. You just hold it like this. You put your finger here. So there's no strain on your pinky, and it's just a different feel. It definitely takes a little getting used to, but I like having it around so that if my hand starts to hurt with one kind, I can kind of switch kinds. Different price points, different safety features, different feel in your hand. So if you have a quilt shop near you that has a lot of different options, I would go in and ask if you can feel them before you invest in them. Definitely keep a lot of the rotary blades on hand because you're going to get your best and easiest results when you keep them sharp and change them regularly. Here's a simple tip when your rotary blades get dull. When you start cutting and maybe it's missing a stitch or two and it's not doing a nice smooth clean cut, it is time to change that blade. So what I do is I keep fresh blades that are nice and sharp, and then I keep an older one that is empty and I write old on it. That is where I put my used blades until that fills up, and then I can put it safely in the trash. I'm going to very carefully take that blade off, put it in the old, close that up. Also, take a minute and clean your casing. And I usually just do that with a scrap of fabric from the trash bin. Just get that lint out of there so you are starting fresh. Now be super, super careful because this is basically a razor blade all the way around that circle. So you do not want to cut yourself. So I always tip it over, put it on my hands like that. They're usually kind of greasy. So you want to just slide one off and then just put it back however your rotary cutter works. Screw that back on, and now I have a nice sharp blade for cutting. The first thing I want to say is there is no shame in needing a seam ripper, because honestly, if you're not using your seam ripper, you're really not sewing that much. None of us are perfect. So if you're new and you get upset like, why do I have to use a seam ripper? I'm no good. Seam ripper equals I am inadequate. You are incorrect. The most experienced people who sew and quilt always have seam rippers on hand, and they usually have their favorites. So I want to show you a few different kinds. This is just a basic, pretty inexpensive seam ripper. Has a nice case so that you're not going to poke yourself. You'll notice it is a little bit bigger than this one or this one, but they're all going to do their job. Right in here, there is a blade, and that is what is going to help cut through the threads that you need to remove to fix whatever went amiss. There is a red ball on all seam rippers, kind of like on the end of a pen. When you first get a pen, sometimes they'll have that and you take it off to use it. You do not take these off of your seam rippers. They are there for a purpose. Although some seam rippers, you can use them both ways, and people have some serious opinions about which direction that ball is supposed to be. Is it supposed to be in the fabric and this is going on top, or does it go this way? And I'm going to say It depends on the seam ripper and it depends on which you prefer. This is a more sophisticated, this is a 4-in-1 tool. So it has a seam ripper. You can put the lid on it. You can use this as a turning tool. You can use this to like finger press to rub against fabric if you're pressing. You know, you just need to get it pressed, but you're not wanting to iron it. And then if you take that off, it has a really sharp pointed stiletto, which is great for holding fabric down, seams, things like that when you're sewing so that you do not sew on your fingers. So this is a 4-in-1 tool. And then this is Cindy's seam ripper. It was designed by Cindy, the owner of Riley Blake Designs. I love how small it is and I love how it sits on my finger. So I'm not like holding and manipulating it while still working with the seam. I find this a lot easier. Now, because of the way this was designed, where it has this little indentation for your thumb, this one is designed for the red ball to be on top when you're using the seam ripper. These we can use either way. So you can have it where the red ball is in the fabric and it's cutting and this part is on top. So let's give that a try. You can go like this. Put the red ball in there and we can just push and cut those threads instead of going through and going from this side and taking the point and like individually picking out stitches. You only want to do that if you really only need a few stitches picked out. Otherwise, that can be very tedious. You saw how quickly I was able to get all of those stitches out. Another seam. So with this one, again, you're just going to take out a few of those stitches. And then you're going to hold this like this. And it's almost like working a zipper. You're just going to push. Now, the other thing that is really important to know that a lot of people do not realize if they haven't been sewing for long is that after a while, this blade, just like a knife in your kitchen, will get dull. So if you have a seam ripper, you know, that was your grandmother's, you might want to keep it for sentimental reasons, but you might want to replace it for use. And you're going to find that you're going to have much better and easier results if your seam ripper is nice and sharp. They all have the little red ball. You can put it on top or the bottom. There's pluses and minuses to each, depending on how the seam ripper was designed. And there is no shame in using a seam ripper.